now. Okay, awesome. Stefanie, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, for anyone else watching, I'm so excited for this conversation with Stefanie, who's a podcaster who is in the Emerging Voices Accelerator. You continue to be in it, but you were part of the accelerator as you built your podcast. So I'm so excited to get into your story. I really was fascinated by you and your story because I think a lot of people will relate. As someone who has, you created your podcast in 2022 at like a while ago in a completely different context. And then you paused for a while and you weren't sure how to restart. And I think we've all been there where we've had an idea, we've been excited about it, we've created it. And then for whatever reason, we took a break and then had a really hard time coming back. So that's what I want to talk to you about. But I think the first thing to ask you is tell us, what is the She Really Gets It podcast about? Who did you make it for? And how has launching it been? Because it just went live last week, right?
Yeah, it did. It did. And so She Really Gets It is a public health podcast. And I'm a public health professional. I've been in public health for about 15 years. I got my master's degree at Drexel in Philly. And I felt earlier in my career, I almost felt like I was exiled from my profession. And that was the best way to describe it, because I recognized like public health is composed of a lot of institutions, all these institutions that we were taught to respect and value. And I was a Black woman from Mississippi, not very wealthy, I come from a single parent household, and I felt in public health, I was like, oh, this is for a very specific archetype. And I don't feel that I fit as a Black woman from Mississippi. I don't feel that I'm kind of seen in this space and in these institutions. And if I feel like that as a public health professional, how do other Black women who are entering health systems, being served by these health systems, how do they feel, right? How are they being treated? Right. So I kind of wanted to create a podcast that spoke to that, because what I know about public health, think about health systems in the United States and how they were built unequal, right? They were built they were literally built on the bodies of Black women, right? We think about J. Marion Sims, the father of gynecology, and why gynecology is still a field and a practice in which women's pain is still dismissed, right? That started with Black women. And that's what I know, is that to solve it for all women and to create true liberation and health for all people, you have to solve it for the most marginalized. So I really wanted to come at, public health with this podcast from that point of view of who is most harmed, who's most affected by something or by a system, and how do we solve it for them, and who in your community is already doing that work. Right. So I wanted to be able to empower people with this podcast.
I think of your podcast as a show that helps you understand the invisible systems behind that we all exist in. Is that how you think of your show?
Yeah, absolutely. Because people don't see things as a system. We often focus on our individual pain, our individual strife, our individual hurt, and not saying this isn't just you. There's a whole system at work. And I'm going to explain to you how it works and how do you interrupt.
Oops, sorry. I think you just cut out for us. Are you back?
Oh, yes, I'm back.
You said, how do you interrupt it?
Yeah, how do you interrupt that? Yes.
Incredible. Okay, so you originally created your show in 2022. I know the last episode was in January of 2023, correct?
Yes.
So tell us about that first launch, and then what happened between then and when you just launched now in February 2026.
Yeah, so with the first launch, I had a producer. There was a little bit of like a team helping, and I was still kind of finding my footing. I knew nothing about podcast production, right? I was very intimidated by the machinery, like the editing process. Like I was a fish out of water. Like, that's brand new to me. I know nothing about that. And it felt very intimidating. And so when I no longer had access to like having a full, like a team behind me or production behind me, I was like, okay, I know what I want the content to be, but I don't know how to use, this software. I was like, I don't know what type of mic to buy. I don't have fancy like cameras and equipment. It just felt very big and very ominous to me. And it really was
Yeah.
holding me back.
Yeah.
It really was holding me back.
So what did you do? Like, what was happening in the 3 years when you were thinking about your podcast, but you weren't actually like actively moving towards it? Like, what was the narrative in your head? And how did you eventually move towards actually creating a season 2 and taking over a lot of the stuff that was intimidating you?
Yeah, well, you know what? So first I tried to find another producer. I was like, you know what? I'll work with like a different producer, but it was just so expensive. And like,
Mm,
especially I was living in DC, I was like, I can't pay, $5,000 an episode to have someone
yeah,
produce this
yeah,
for me. Like,
yeah,
I'm a single individual, and so how do I do that? So I was like, you know what? I don't really have time for this right now, even though it's something I'm very passionate about. I have to, continue to work, and life just happens. You're working, you're
yeah,
moving. And between, 2022 and 2025, a lot changed in the world. So it was just an
You're-
overwhelming time in
yeah.
general.
For all of us, for all of us.
Yes, for all of
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
And one day, I think I came across you, like you were on Instagram. I don't know. I think I was still
Mm.
looking at like possibly leaving the country. And for some reason, you kept coming into my feed. The algorithm
Uh, yeah, the algorithm
brought me.
gods.
Yes. The algorithm gods brought me to Emerging Voices. Um, and I was like, oh, like you were doing like a brief, like, description of like, emerging voices, what you were looking for, and the fact that you were looking for other people that might be interested in starting a podcast or restarting one.
Mhm,
So I
mhm,
reached out saying like, I don't know if she's gonna get
mhm,
back to me. Um,
mhm.
or I'm sure she's overwhelmed with like hundreds of people getting back to her already.
Yeah,
But I was like, let me just reach
yeah,
out and like see what happens.
yeah,
And yeah, and I think we met on Zoom. We had a brief
yeah.
call, and that was that. Yeah.
And I remember one of the first things you told me on that first call was how intimidating you found the tech and the just the process of producing yourself because you had never done that before. And oh, your dog is freaking
He
out.
is. He's at the window. There's a cat outside. Ignore him. Ignore him.
uh, I'm sure the cat will go away and he'll be quiet in a moment. Oh,
I
I've been
will.
wanting a dog, so I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Let me grab it. Okay. He'll be at the door. Let's see. He'll be at my door soon enough, scratching to come back in.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. But I remember one of our first conversations was you telling me how you were just really overwhelmed with the idea of you having to produce yourself. And I remember you saying, editing, like, I just can't imagine editing myself. So now you are on the other side of that, right? Like,
Yes.
you managed to move through those fears and you were very you showed up to our weekly calls every Wednesday. You were very honest about what was coming up for you that week, but you didn't pretend like everything was okay. You also didn't give up halfway. So I'm curious about the emotional like kind of process of getting over those fears because those fears were really overwhelming and really big to you before you started.
Yeah. Absolutely. So for
So
me,
tell
I
me
learned
about that.
that, yeah, I feel like I had to kind of sit with it, like let it
Mm,
be. And I think for myself, and I work with children sometimes, like in education as well, and explaining to them, like, you don't have to get it right every time. It's okay to make a
mhm,
mistake. It's okay if things go
mhm,
wrong. We're going to pick it up. We're going to
mhm,
try again. And that
mhm.
happened. And that's part of it is learning like this is an iterative process. You're going to make a mistake. It's just feedback. Try again. We're going to make changes this
Yeah.
time. We learn from that. We do it a little differently. We figure it out. It may take some time, and it's not always going to happen on a very specific timeline for you because
Yeah.
you do have other competing things, and that's just a part of life. Life happens. So, how do we work this dream, this this calling, I think it's a calling, um,
Yeah.
into like your everyday life because it's something that you're passionate about. Because if it's been 3 years and you're still thinking about it, there's a reason for that. Um, so I think I had to kind of pace myself and say, like, okay, we're going to dedicate a couple hours a week to this. Like every Friday at 3 p.m., this is what we work on, right?
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and so we don't have to get it perfect every time, but we're going to keep on trying. Everything is feedback, it's all iterative, and we'll make corrections and updates as we go along.
Okay, so you said two super interesting things to me that I don't want to forget. The first is you said this is a calling. So we have to dive into that because I think this is true for many of us who choose to do a podcast. And I think, like, for me in particular, this is part of why I started Emerging Voices, because I'm like, there are so many brilliant people, specifically women, specifically Black women, who don't use their voice, even though they have this inkling inside that this is like a part of their mission, if not the whole mission, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you about that. But the other piece is you said we'll work on this at 3 p.m. every Friday. So we'll talk about workflow as well. All right. So, first things first, how did you know this was a calling, or like, how did that calling get solidified? Because I've never heard you say this before. And I love that you're saying it now.
Yeah, so I'm an educator. I've always loved educate. I always loved health education very specifically. So
Mm,
I like to teach. I like to explain things because I know when I was a kid, I had a hard time understanding certain teachers, or I had hard time understanding certain concepts. I wanted it explained in a very specific way. And so to me,
mhm,
I judge an educator like, how can you break it down to make it simple, to make it easy?
mhm,
If you can't do that, I think
mhm,
man, I'm like, oh, you're not a great teacher, right? You're
mhm,
doing a job, but you're not a teacher and you're not an educator.
mhm,
So for me, like that was
mhm.
always my calling, is that I'm an educator. I can break things down into like teeny tiny increments to make you understand. If you still don't get it, we'll break it down even smaller, because I know
Yep.
I always struggled with that as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I don't ever want to make someone feel intimidated in any classroom in which I am
Yeah.
teaching, right? So health
Yeah.
education was my passion. And so I worked in infectious disease in Northern Virginia. Absolutely loved my job. Absolutely loved it. Loved
Mm.
interacting with patients, loved interacting with doctors and other healthcare providers, because I know that the work that I'm doing is at the end of the day making someone's life better, easier, less
Mm. Mhm.
intimidating, right?
Mhm.
And so if I can make a patient come in and things feel a little less intimidating, right? I can explain to you like what's going to
Yeah.
happen. These are the steps. That makes me happy. That gives me joy.
Yeah.
So for me, when I think about what a podcast can do, is it can be a source of providing education and
Yeah.
giving
It's
people
like an
resources.
amplification. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and real resources, because I am a public health professional, right? I do have a
Mhm.
background in this, and I'm going to give
Mhm.
you actual facts because I want people to be able to make informed decisions. That was always like a pet peeve of mine. It was when people are not allowed to make informed decisions, when they're not given accurate information and full information to make the best decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's what this is for me, giving people accurate information so they can make the best decisions for themselves. And
Mm.
that to me that's a calling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about your workflow and your schedule, because I mean, you were in Emerging Voices, so we had the roadmap laid out for you. Like, first you do this, and then you do this, and then you do that. Is that basically what you were following when you sat down at 3 p.m. every Friday? And how long did it actually take you each week to make your podcast?
So for me, like I would try to do like for me, like every Friday and maybe like in Saturday morning worked for me, right? Of
Okay.
like whether I'm like meeting with a friend to do it or going to a coffee shop to do that, because I'm someone who I kind of have to step outside of the home in order to
I get
do
that.
work like that. Yeah, I need to be like in a space where I can sit there and kind of like not be in around other people that are my family members or even, my dog.
Yeah.
So so for me, like stepping outside of the home and having a set place, I'm gonna go here every Friday, 2 p.m., 2 to 5 p.m. Whatever I get done, I get done. And that's my time to work on that. And
Mm.
it actually, I mean, like for me, like that's what worked, but it actually took me longer than I think I initially expected it to take. I think from the time I really started, from the time I had my first interview until I launched, it was about a year because it took me a while.
Interesting.
It
Yeah.
was about a
Why did it
yeah.
take why do you think it took a year? Is it that you were showing up every week? Were there periods where you didn't work on it? Like, or is a year actually a realistic timeline for a lot of people who are also working full-time jobs?
Yeah,
Because
I think it can.
there's a big narrative, sorry. There's a big narrative of like launch your podcast in 8 weeks, which I never say because I'm like, I mean, you can launch a podcast in 8 weeks, but I don't know that you're gonna like it or that anyone's actually gonna listen to it.
Exactly. And so for me, it was like, first of all, having a very specific point of view and knowing like how I want this season to look, who I want to
Mm,
interview, like which
mhm,
guests are going to help me bring this season to life in terms of what my
mhm,
overall goal is. Because then you're not just working with
mhm,
your schedule, you're working with the schedule of other people, often
mhm.
very like, busy, in
Yep.
demand individuals.
Yeah.
So that's its own animal of you don't have control over someone else's schedule when they're available, when they're not. And so unless you're doing all solo episodes when it's just you, if you're dealing with other individuals, that makes it a little more complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
So real.
and then yes, and then of course there's the editing process. I made some mistakes, especially when at the beginning I had to there were sound issues. There were issues of me like getting the tracks off track, and I'm having to go back and like fix things. But it was a learning process. It was part of
Yeah.
the process. I kind of learned what not to do very early on, but it
Yeah.
wasn't time consuming and at times a little bit
Mhm.
frustrating. Um,
Mhm.
so those first growing pains, they are what they are, right? I think that's part of the
Did
process.
you ever wanna give up? Because a year is a long time to stick to something without seeing the fruits fully, you know?
You know what? I'll say this. So I think there might be like a short period of time where I was like, oh, how am I ever going to get this done? But I think after I recorded my first episode and edited it, I remember like breaking down in tears because it was like the first time I think in a long time, like especially as an adult, where you get to kind of see something from beginning to end and see like the fruits of your labor, even
Yeah.
though it wasn't going to be released
Yeah.
yet, but seeing
Yeah.
like, oh wow, like I did this interview. I went after this interview. I interviewed this person. I've edited it, I've added in the intro, I've done the work, we've got the music, and I was finally listening to it for the first time and just started like crying because I had not.
Mm.
It's different to like work for, a company, right? You have an employee, you're an employee, you have an employer, you do, what is expected of you. It's a very different thing when it's very
Mhm.
self-directed. This is work that I'm passionate about. I assigned this to
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm.
I committed to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
um,
and there's no
right.
scapegoat, like, you can't blame any part of it on anything else other than, like, the time, effort, energy that was put into it, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first time I was like, oh wow, I created this from beginning to end. I think as adults, we don't always get to do that. We don't
Yeah.
get to be self-directed and say, like, this is a project that I'm going to take on my own. This is something I'm passionate about. I'm going to create it from beginning to end. And I realized I had not done that in so long. We don't really get in the systems that we live within, this very capitalist, in demand, constantly producing systems. We don't often get to do a lot for ourselves. We don't get to do a
Yeah.
lot of work that's self-directed. And so for me,
Yeah.
like that was when I was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to make this happen. So
Mm.
that was like my little like drive of like, okay, I can do this. It's only going to get better, and it gave me that motivation to keep going.
You know, it's so interesting because we do live in this world that's so driven if you're in the Western world in general, like, the drive is to produce more, create more, work more, etcetera. And on one hand, I don't want anyone to do more of that, and I don't wanna be someone that perpetuates that. On the other hand, I hear you say, I created something from beginning to end, and I cried." And I feel that because I'm like, yes, there is something so beautiful about actually creating something of your own that you are proud of, but it does take work. So I'm curious for you, as someone who is very aware of the invisible systems we live in, and like overworking is definitely a public health issue, right? So, like,
Yes.
how did you balance the two? How did you balance like keeping your mental health well while also moving towards doing something that is hard and it is more work?
You know what? It was a blessing and a curse. So, like 2022, I was working on a contract with the CARES Act of all things, in the US.
Mm,
And so when the
mhm,
contract ended, the work ended, and I was like, okay. I had my LLC for a while, but I hadn't ever worked full time like on a contract, like outside of like having an employer, a traditional employer. And I just so happened to run into like a former colleague who had started their own consulting firm. So starting in 2022, I had started consulting. And so I had a little more, I would say having a little bit more flexibility like with my time was something that helped me in that way. It was, of
mm,
course, it's hard when
mm.
you're working for yourself. You have to, it comes with its own challenges of like, okay,
Yeah,
how do I afford things in the US? How do I afford things like healthcare and this and,
yeah,
making sure that I have some level of stability. But so there was that, but there was also like, okay, I have a little more flexibility with my schedule and my time in terms of like how do I want to utilize my free time?
yeah,
What do I want to work towards? And it's also a little bit of a motivation of like, okay, like, the world has changed so much, right? Especially for
yeah.
Black women, with 600,000 Black women now out of the workforce, right?
Mhm.
And so, in one hand, it's kind of like a little bit scary of like, I'm going to work towards something on my own. It's also like, okay, the world has changed. There's the fear of not having stability, but there's also I think there's like a new direction of like building your own space, building your own
Mm,
platform, building your own stability, getting to know who else is in your community that you can start to build with. Um,
mhm.
and so really generating our own sustainable systems. I think that's also like a part of it of like, okay, the world is changing all around me. How do I adjust
Yeah,
to that? Um,
yeah,
so part of this is also like, oh, like the world is changing all around me. There is no specific safe thing to do, safe place to be. So how do I build that for myself or at least start working towards it? I have nothing to
yeah,
lose, literally at a certain point.
yeah,
It's kind of
yeah.
like might as well put myself out there. It's kind of like you there's what I wanted and once I wanted it and kind of identified what it is that I want and where the direction I wanted to go, things kind of like pushed me in that direction.
Yeah.
So it is a lot of like give and take, but I kind of think once you kind of have a focus in a very specific direction of what you want to do. One of my friends told me that years ago of like, if you're in a crowd of people and you don't quite know like where you want to be, you'll start feeling people kind of like pushing against you. You don't know how you're going to get where you want to be because you don't know where you want to be. The moment you set your sights
Mm.
on a specific direction, you'll notice the crowd starts to part, right?
I've
You're
never
very
heard that. I
self,
love
yeah.
that.
The crowd starts to
Yeah.
part because you know exactly where you want to go. So
Yeah.
having that very specific direction of like, I know where I want to go. I know what I want this to be.
Yeah.
That really
I
was
also
like a big
find
part of it.
I also find that working on my own creative projects gives me a lot of energy for everything else. Did you
Yeah.
find that to be true?
Absolutely. Because it's kind of like once I kind of have like that creative outlet also, like I think I'm a happier person
Yeah.
instead of when I'm kind of like keeping things so contained.
Yeah.
Because for me, like I know I think about like, our systems all the time and not having any type of outlet to express that or express what it is
Yeah.
that I'm thinking about that
Yeah.
can feel suffocating at times. So
100%.
having an
100%.
outlet, a creative outlet, a way to express that in a way that's healthy, in a way that's helpful to my community, gives me more energy and gives me more the ability to share more with others as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm currently working on a podcast that I've been putting off for a very long
Ooh.
time. And it's so interesting. I basically just work on it on Fridays, and then the rest of the time I'm working on my business. But It is crazy, Stefanie, how much happier I am in my day. Forget happier. I just feel more alive. Like
Yeah.
things went from feeling quite dull to feeling like the lights got turned on. And when I really started thinking about it, I was like, oh, yeah, because until now, I was kind of just like doing the disciplined thing and then consuming a lot of information as opposed to like processing everything I'm consuming and alchemizing it, like turning it into something that
Yes.
I find beautiful or useful out in the world, which,
Yes.
like, of course you feel more alive when you do that. Like it sounds logical once you've actually done it.
It's true though. It's true. We
Yeah.
just don't get the time to
Yeah.
do it. Everything is competing for our energy and our time and our brain space. So you
Yeah.
don't realize like how like uh, tight things can start to feel at a certain point.
Yeah. Let's go to some comments that others are asking. So I don't know how to say this person's name, but someone fashion says, I just started a public health podcast too. It's largely thanks to Huete. I'm so happy to hear that. It's called Not IPHIED.
Notified?
Notified. Oh my God, you're so smart. Am I still eligible for the Emerging Voices program? Yes, you totally are. Please, I will put an application down below. So in the video description, so you can add your, submit your application there. More Black Girl Magic. Yes, we love to
Yes,
see
I
it.
love that. I love that. Notified. That's
Camilla
so cool.
says, hey girls. Yes, I do love Notified now that I know how to say it. So true about public health, similar in the UK. Yep.
Yeah.
Trisha says, I love the podcast idea. Oh, I love the podcast idea. Very much needed. Congratulations, Stefanie. So Trisha is in Emerging
You.
Voices. And then Mallory Wild says, here listening in while doing other things. Looking forward to chatting on a future live, learning from you and others. Oh, I hope we get to that place. Gwen says, thank you for the space. Donna says, good to be here at work, but here. Thank you, Donna, for joining. Najuma is here, also from Emerging Voices. She says, yes,
Yay!
dealing with other people's schedules makes it hard to stick to a timeline. Yes, ma'am.
Hi,
That is very
Najima.
true. We have a lot more comments. I'm going to pause and go back to our conversation, and then we'll resume the comments in a bit. But Stefanie, I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about your working with a producer and then working with yourself, what was it that you thought you needed a producer for versus like now that you've done it? What do you realize, oh, this is what I actually needed and I got it, or I'm working on like improving that or whatever? Like tell us the truth versus what you thought was the truth.
So certain things really scared me, for example, and things that I'm sure other people are like, girl, are you serious? But for me, like I'm not in marketing, right? Like anything that has to do with making things look beautiful. I know what I like when I see it, but podcast cover art, how do I do that? What is an RSS feed? What is like what are these things? Scared me to death,
Hilarious.
right?
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like, oh, I need this background, like in, broadcast journalism to be able to do this. And also, what it is, I think sometimes we're taught that we need to be validated. We need someone to tell us we're good at this and therefore you should do it. Right? We need to be chosen. We need to be chosen by, insert, the institution in order to be told to do this. I need to be chosen by CNN to be the medical correspondent in order to be able to have a podcast on medicine. Your degree doesn't, for some reason, in my mind, like that public health degree didn't even matter. I wasn't chosen by the public health gods to do this and to have a podcast. I need to have an institution behind me. That was, even though I did it one time, it was still like, okay, you don't quite know what you're doing. Those little voices of insecurity start to creep in and you are kind of like, I need someone's validation. What if people hated my first season? What if they thought it was stupid? What if I'm not qualified to be here? So I think having to write down like why you deserve this. and for yourself, not for anything else, but just for yourself, explaining to
Yeah.
yourself, convincing yourself that you have a right to be here and you have a right to be in this space. You have a
Mm,
right to, like, your research matters, right? Like, it is valuable and you don't need to be validated by another institution, because guess what? They're not going to do it. I'm kind of at that point like, girl, they're
yeah.
not going to do it. You better validate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah,
You're-
exactly. I would also say, I think for me, I realized, oh, if you wait for validation from, especially from institutions, but even from other people, it's going to be a very long time before you get to where you're going. But I do kind of think I need community. Like trying to do it entirely by myself is also kind of impossible.
yeah. Oh,
Is that true for
absolutely.
you?
Oh, absolutely. I think so, because we're conditioned to do that. I think we're conditioned to be like, you as an individual, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, even though that's not really how any true functioning society actually works. Any true functioning
Yeah.
sustainable society, if you look at history, that's not how they actually work. Like, it was interdependent. It's interdependent. This is an
Yes.
ecosystem, right?
Yes.
We are all dependent on one another. We are naturally social creatures as humans. And even when our interaction with, like, the actual planet, the animals, we are interdependent on one another.
Yes.
You start as a public health professional. If you look at, like, environmental health, for example, if you look at the things that harm, guess what? The things that harm the environment also harm humans. Crazy thought.
Shocker.
And
Shocker.
the things that harm animals also harm humans.
Yeah.
So when we do things to harm our environment, we're hurting ourselves. And I think often we cut
Yeah.
ourselves off and we're like, we need to do it on our own by ourselves. If we can't, that means we're not meant to be there. We're not good enough to be there. As opposed to, like, no, it helps to have people that you can bounce an idea off of. I know when I was even when I was looking for, like, I think like music for the podcast, getting feedback from the other women in the Emerging Voices program was so helpful, to be like, okay, so what do y'all think of these 3 choices? This is what we're going to do. Like, actually getting real time feedback of, like, okay, let's look at this intro that I wrote. Can I get some
Mhm.
feedback on, like, what's the
Mhm.
best, cold open? Like, not just sitting there with myself and thinking, oh my God, everything's awful, I did a terrible job. Actually getting
Yes.
feedback that
Yeah.
is objective and helpful keeps you from being stuck, because it's so easy to
Yeah.
get stuck in your own negative thought cycle, as opposed to
Yeah.
actually, guess what? Go to the little accelerator program, ask a question, send it to the group, and see what they think. It kind of
Yeah.
shakes you out of your own, shakes you out of your own, like, you know, fears. And once again, just like the things that we all do, the voices we all have in ourselves and our heads that tell us that we shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I would say for sure for all of us that when we're first beginning, our gauge of how good or how much work something needs is very off kilter. Like it is not to be trusted. So I remember you submitted, it was, I think your first or second um introduction to your episode. So I give, for everyone watching, I give feedback on the first like 3 to 5 episodes for all of the students in the accelerator. And Stefanie, you submitted, I think it was your first or your second episode. And I was floored by your intro because you sounded like a professional. Don't look surprised. That's fake surprise because I tell you this all the time. I was genuinely floored because I was like, this sounds like a professional podcaster. And it was because you wrote the intro the same way you would say it, as opposed to what a lot of people do is they write how they would write a term paper. And then they try to read that. And that's not as fun to listen to. But your intro was so just honest to your personality. It flowed and it was just easy to listen to. And I remember being so impressed. And when I told you that, you were like, really? I was like, yes, I'm so glad you submitted this because you would have no idea what's actually really good, what you're doing really well, in addition to what you need to improve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think any of us have, like, we've all, like, we went to school, we've been in academia to a certain extent, right? And there's a specific way academic writing works, right? And there's a specific way to write things, there's a very specific structure. And if you're not someone who writes like that, you can kind of get into the mindset of, like, I guess I'm not like a great writer, I'm, you kind of, you, once again, you believe what like these systems tell you about yourself
Yeah.
working in, as opposed to like, I've never worked in broadcast journalism, right? Like I've never been asked to write like that. So it is a little bit of my experience, my very limited experience, right? I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be terrible. Oh, it's awful. As opposed to like, oh, I've got Huete here, who's actually a professional producer,
Yeah.
who's been doing this.
And like you can trust this other person, right? Because it's not like
Yes.
your mom or your best friend who's gonna like whatever you make.
Yes, yes, very different. And so it's like, oh, really? That's it takes a while for your brain to kind of catch up with like, oh, there are different
Yeah.
ways to write, right? There are
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
there are different ways to communicate.
Yeah.
And so it was for me like, oh wow, as an adult, once again, we don't often get the opportunity to learn new things at a certain age. Or to build new skills that we want to build, like right, beyond like I got to take an Excel program, or I have to take a insert the software that you have no interest in actually utilizing.
Yeah.
So it's very different that you get to like build a new skill set,
Mm-hmm.
and do something that you actually love to do, or that you actually want
Mm-hmm.
to do, or something that, once again, like I said before, that's very like self-directed, in the direction
Mm-hmm.
that you really want to go. So that's a very unique, that's an extremely unique, I think, experience, and very
Yeah.
different from other, I guess, other my previous experience of trying to work with like a producer where everything's on them. I don't really touch it.
Mm-hmm.
I have no
Mm-hmm.
idea where things live. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I felt very like dependent on this outside force. Whereas once I joined Emerging Voices, was kind of like, okay, I own it from beginning to end. Like I did the podcast cover art, it lives here, and I have a lot more control over the product itself, over what goes out there.
Yeah. And if you do decide to hire a producer at any point, or an editor, or whatever additional teammate to help you make your show, you're in a completely different position than you ever were, because you have a certain amount of knowledge now that allows you to that you can leverage, that you can say
Yeah.
no when someone suggests something that just doesn't work for your taste or for your
Yeah.
vibe. You know what I mean? Which, like, if you can't do that stuff on your own, it's a very tough position to put yourself in, because you technically and like practically are dependent on this person.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, so we have someone here who says, "Glad you got over your technophobia. I have to get there too. Hello from the UK." Is there anything
Hi.
specific you did, Stefanie, to get over your tech fears?
Honestly, okay, so I think it's also like some of the software you use. So some software, and I'm not gonna name any specific one right now, but there's some software that's a little more intimidating. Even though
Okay,
it's like great
you can
software,
name
it's
names.
okay. So I used, for example, right now I'm using Descript. Okay, Descript is a little
Mhm,
bit easier in that if you want to edit a track, all you have to do is like it gets to, you edit it out in the transcript. You actually have a written
mhm,
transcript, and you can cross it out in the transcript,
mhm,
and then it edits it
mhm.
in the track. As there are others like, which are great software programs, but I think they're a little more advanced. Like I used to use, can I name it? What I used
You
before?
can.
So I
Yeah.
used Hindenburg before, which is great. I love Hindenburg. But for someone at my skill level, it was a little more cumbersome for me to use because I'm actually playing with the track itself.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting the tracks are getting, it's like two tracks, the tracks are getting off track. It's, oh my God. For me, like that was too much.
Overwhelming.
It was very
Yeah.
overwhelming because
Yeah.
I wasn't used to doing that. Now in the future, I might very well go back to Hindenburg and be like, okay, I like this better. Right.
Yeah.
But that's for further down the road when I just feel a little more comfortable with the editing process in and of itself. So for me, like having more beginner friendly software really helped me a lot.
Yeah.
And so it kind of
And
gave
I
me that
mean,
nice stepping stone.
we used Descript as professional producers. So like we would use tools like Hindenburg and Pro Tools, which are all editing software. We would use those tools to mix and master the episode. Like we would give it to the sound engineer so they could mix and master in that platform.
Okay.
I've also edited in Pro Tools, but I think it's just easier. Like, even if you're a professional, it's just easier to edit by looking at a transcript. And there are times if you're making like a very emotional show where you don't really want to look at the letters and you just want to cut the transcript, just the audio files, maybe those are times and places to use just a tool like Hindenburg or Pro Tools. But I think, to be honest with you, all of them are getting more and more AI integrations put in. So I think they're going to look closer and closer to one another rather than the opposite way. Like, I don't know that in 2 or 3 years, it will be a better idea to use Hindenburg, because I don't know that it will do that much more than Descript does. Does that make sense?
Okay. No, and I feel a little bit better with saying like, okay, we said that to sound engineers, because I was sitting here like, beating myself up like, oh my God.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No. You never beat yourself up. Like, if you ever tell me that, I will tell you all the reasons why you should never beat yourself up. All right. Camilla says, I'm working on my podcast this month. I'm a professional organizer. Thank you, girls. You're helping a lot. So happy to hear that. Don't let people zap your motivation. Amen. I think both of us would really agree with that. Let's go down here. Huete, love being here. Love learning from you and everyone. I'm in a major transition of personal and professional life. Good luck. Year of the fire horse. I think a lot of us are going through these major transformations. Starting a podcast is a serious journey at heart and soul. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Cool. Najuma says, community, yes to building our support systems. Being alone in this process makes your doubtful thoughts grow. Woo! Yes. Could not agree with that.
I'm so glad Najuma is here. Najuma is like my friend in the program, and she's always has so much positive things to say, and it's just a really bright light. So I'm glad you're here, Najuma.
Yeah, and we'll be doing this with Najuma soon enough because her podcast will be launching soon enough. We also have Trisha here who says, Emerging Voices provides great community. I wouldn't be able to do this without community. Amen. All right, so where can people find the She Really Gets It podcast? What should they subscribe to? I'm subscribed to your Substack, you on Spotify, you on Apple. For everyone new here, where can they find you?
So I am on Substack at She Really Gets It. I'm also on Apple and Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are found on She Really Gets It. You can also find me on Instagram at She Really Gets It. So please, for all those platforms, it will be so helpful if you follow, subscribe, and rate the podcast. It really helps people find it. But I hope I have 3 episodes up right now. And I hope y'all are able to take a listen in. Let me know what you think about the show. Leave a comment. It really has been a true labor of love.
I'm so proud of you. I can't wait to see all of the new pathways that the podcast creates for you. And it's really beautiful to see you living out your purpose. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Awesome.
All right.